Hello everybody, this is Avi from Jerusalem here at 12 Tribe Films, and as you probably know, the Israeli public is all busy in election season. So we thought it would be nice to talk to someone who is an expert in politics, Israeli politics as well as American politics, and I'd like to welcome Ruth Lieberman, political consultant and the director of Yes Israel. Welcome, Ruth.
Hi, thanks very much.
Can you please introduce yourself to everyone, who you are and what excites you about political consultancy?
Okay, well, Ruth Jaffe, Lieberman. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. You can save the Cleveland jokes for later. I moved here for college, been in Israel ever since, had the political bug from the beginning, was planning on being a journalist here, and then was kind of hooked into politics and with working with Benny Begin way back. I won't even tell you when. So it's been a great ride ever since, and I'm proud to be able to say that I've been spending a lot of time maybe banging our head against that collective wall, trying to change things, but you know, at least trying. So that's what I've been doing, and yeah, I've been in politics for a long time. Worked in the Knesset, worked in the government, wherever my people and the public voting took me. And now I'm working as a private political consultant and working mostly with between Jerusalem and Washington.
So it is a pleasure having you online with us, and I'm sure everyone is interested to hear what are the issues that the Israeli public is dealing with that also possibly affects the American public. So why don't we start talking about one of those issues, if you could raise one of them, and then afterwards let's start talking about some of the Israeli parties so that the American public can start to understand a little more intricacy about what we're going through in deciding who to vote for. So what issue can we talk about today that would interest them, that is of interest to Israel and the American public?
I think anyone who has a radio or a television or a computer at this point, or a newspaper in their hand, for the old-timers, who's reading anything about Israel and the United States is seeing that we're talking about the congressional invite to Bibi, to our Prime Minister, to address a joint session of Congress, and whether the administration should have extended that invitation, and what Obama thinks about it, and is Netanyahu going to come, and what's he going to say? Well, that is an issue that's playing out as an internal political issue among the political parties here in Israel, which I personally think is a little ridiculous. You'll pardon me for that. But when the Speaker of the House, Boehner, invites the Prime Minister of Israel to speak before a joint session of Congress, well, that's great. That shows that the U.S. believes that America needs Israel as a cherished ally and as an important friend and wants to hear from its head of state, which is great, and historically that's what's happened beforehand, so I'm not quite sure what all the fuss is there. In terms of Israel, well, of course, Netanyahu's political rivals are going to step up and say, hey, politically, you can't do that because America's meddling inside Israel affairs, and Israel's in the middle of a political campaign, and that influences our electorate. Okay, that's fair enough. But to say that Boehner had it in himself to try to influence our politics, or that America is inviting Netanyahu because they wanted to be prime minister, well, that's just thinking small and Israel-centric. And I find it even almost embarrassing because the world has much larger problems, and it certainly was not the issue at the top of the list when Boehner decided to invite our prime minister. I know from Congress and from conversations within those offices that they weren't even aware we're in a political campaign environment. So, you know, let's not think like sometimes we do fall into that trap and think like small Israel and think that the whole world surrounds us. And yes, it's okay. The Labor Party, or what do they call themselves, the Zionist camp, Livni, Bougie, the people who are in the labor camp, who are on the other side of things and want to bring down a Netanyahu government, they're going to use it for their advantage. But we, the people, should really not do that and not fall into that trap. And we should understand that America inviting Israel is an honor and a duty, and I'm really glad that Netanyahu is finding a way to go and to address the joint session of Congress.
So, as someone who believes that Benjamin Netanyahu is one of the most knowledgeable and respected people in terms of the issue of a potential nuclear Iran and its threat to the whole world, not just to Israel, and someone who believes that, and I'm talking about myself, someone who believes that this is something that has to be taken care of and doesn't necessarily trust the way the Obama administration has been dealing with nuclear talks with Iran. Was this a smart political move in the long run to attain that end goal. And can it possibly be dangerous because of the political implications taking place today as a result of what they're saying was against protocol?
Well, let's remember, just this month, President Obama, in his State of the Union speech, basically lied to the American people. I'm not a big fan of administrations that don't treat the Israeli government with the respect it's due. On the other hand, I respect President Obama as the President of the United States, and therefore I expect more of him than what he said about Iran in his speech. Calling for an end to sanctions, or saying that they will not work in the administration to promote any further sanctions against Iran, is something that is really not responsible. And it doesn't matter what is good for Israel or what Israel thinks. It matters what's good for the American people in their own eyes. And I'm glad that Congress has now taken the stand and said, no, we're going to protect those sanctions, and we're even going to deepen them, because we've all seen, as we know in Israel firsthand, that a strong hand is what terrorists understand, and we want to make sure that America and Israel messages out to Iran that we're not going to take it, because otherwise we don't just become a laughing matter to the terrorists, but we're actually encouraging more, and we're encouraging Iran to go for it, and that's something that I certainly don't want to see Israel or America doing. So yes, Netanyahu should be invited. Netanyahu should speak. Every leader of the free world can speak in Congress if they so choose. It has nothing to do with our politics and our internal elections. It has to do with the larger issue. And Netanyahu has been the outspoken figure on the world stage on Iran for years. Go back to when he was in the UN. Go back to when he was the speaker there, and he was so eloquently speaking against terrorism, against countries who promoted terrorism, against all of the kind of actions that we're seeing now being taken by Iran, the country, and behind the scenes by Iran and other countries. So Netanyahu is the guy we want to hear from in order to strengthen the Western world and take down the threat of Iran. That's it. Let's think big. Let's think important. Let's not get bogged down. And those are the kind of things that I'm hoping the Israeli voter is going to look at when we go to the polls, too. But you never know.
So I want to follow up with the following question that many people are asking today. Well, okay, I accept everything you're saying, but what really will a speech in front of Congress do? President Obama already promised he's going to veto any sanctions bill that comes up. So what will a speech by Netanyahu in front of both houses of Congress accomplish to help in the end game of stopping Iran get the nuclear bomb?
Well, listen, we American Israelis don't want to embarrass America, don't want to do what's wrong for Israel, want to figure out how to affect the world stage in order to make things right. So that's my reference point. And if you're looking at a Netanyahu speech, it's not the be-all and the end-all. It's not even that big a deal. I think the media is having a little bit of a party here, and we should be a lot smarter, and I trust the people who are watching and ourselves, the constituents. I mean, we're a little smarter because we face dangers every day, and we know what it's like to live under threat and not have the time to be so petty. But a Netanyahu speech is just another factor in the war against terror, in the war against countries that promote destroying other countries and other people. And so, you know, that's why I say more power to you. Invite all the leaders you want with the right messaging, with the strength, with the standing up, sending the right messages and ideas. And I don't think an Obama administration or a Republican-run House and Senate can oppose how I've just put it. So if we see it in that perspective, I think there's going to be a lot of standing ovations. It's going to be a lot of strong talk, and it's good for all of us.
Well, I guess the best way to end this topic is just to tell you about the slogan that we've taken on as a follow-up of this issue, which basically was, while the White House has been busy trying to save its honor in terms of the whole protocol of Netanyahu being invited, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is doing all he can to try to save the free world from Iran. So that's a good way to sum up everything you're saying right now, and hopefully will make a difference when he does speak. All right, let's go do a deep dive into one of the Israeli political parties. What can you tell us today about the Likud party to educate our viewers?
All right. Well, those who know everything will forgive me, and those who need the basic blocks will probably get to that another time. But in general, the Likud is the ruling party. The Likud is part of a parliamentary system. It's the party that put together the coalition and runs the government. Benjamin Netanyahu, is number one seated in the Likud, and therefore he is the prime minister. He chose his government ministers from among his own party members, and he chose his government ministers from among those parties that joined his coalition to make this government. So he's got a lot to do. As he said yesterday to us, said, I sometimes feel like a kindergarten teacher, and not to belittle our politicians, because as opposed to a lot of other people, I think that they're highly intelligent, ideological, hardworking. On the other hand, you got a coalition system in our parliament where you got to make everyone play nice with the other guy. And we saw a few weeks ago when they didn't exactly play nice and they didn't want to share their toys, they felled the government. Our government fell because of personal discussions among leaders of the different parties, and they just decided that it's time not to get along. They decided not to get along and then to just make things fall apart, and let's put them back together another way. It's a puzzle that can be pieced together in many different ways. Have to go to elections to do that, but we'll see that, and then we'll be puzzle making again. About the Likud government. The Likud has led the government many times. The big change was from this country's, since its inception. David Ben-Gurion led the government. He led the country, basically. He started Israel with that, with the declaration in 1948, and he led labor-led governments every time until Menachem Begin came along. And he led the revisionists and the Likud party. And he said things have to be different. And instead of social democracy, we're going to have capitalism. And instead of liberal, and I hate to use those words, but we understand them, liberal politics when it comes to how we deal with our Arab countries around us and within our borders. And Menachem Begin said, we're going to deal with it with a strong hand, and we're going to make some peace treaties. And in 1978, the whole country was, I guess, in shock when he won. And therefore, 1977, sorry, it's called the Mahapach, the change, the overthrow. Some people were packing their bags and saying, we better leave Israel because this is the end. Some people were celebrating in the streets, a whole new way of thinking. And since then, we've said goodbye to most of the social democratic values. We've opened up the capitalism. The economy is now a free economy. And as Netanyahu reiterated yesterday, and he's been doing so in his political campaigning now, he's reminding people of that. He's saying, we lowered taxes, we encouraged business, we encouraged work, we've gotten people out there in the workforce, and unemployment is down, and we're building new housing, and we're subsidizing first houses for people so that they can buy it, but then they're on their own. He's showing the free economy that you guys know so well over in America is also the fiscal battle between Democrats and Republicans. Big government, small government, how we do taxation and all of our fiscal policies. That's something that Netanyahu is very strong on. He was first Minister of the Treasury, the finance minister here in Israel. And that is when he implemented all this. He slashed all sorts of regulations, and we now have a much freer economy, and I know that most people feel that. So that's a major issue between the Labor Party and the Likud Party. I would hate to see it go. I'm afraid to see it go.
Would you say that, I think some people explain it, that the Likud is more of the free market government as opposed to the Social Democrats in Israel, the Labor Party that is more going after the Social Democrats of Europe, the more socialist type of economy there. Is that a major difference?
Oh, absolutely. And I don't think it's my interpretation. I think it's part of their platforms, and I encourage everybody to go and look at their platforms. They're not all in English, and some are a little vague, but parties should be encouraged to have platforms and put their values down on paper and give them to the voter to decide for themselves if they want it this way or that way. So social democracy has been out for a while, although with a twist. We do take care of our weak parts of society, and I think that's something that's a Jewish value that I'm really proud of in Israel, and it does come from pressure from the bottom, from nonprofit organizations and the government itself and all the members of Knesset. But the free economy, the capitalist attitude is something that we've seen starting with Begin and through Netanyahu as finance minister and through his work as prime minister. As he said yesterday, I'm now finance minister too since the government fell. And he's able to fund the initiatives that are really part of a capitalist society, a free economy. It's a change in Israel since the 80s. And it's only been for the good. If you look at the ups and downs that the world economy has taken, in America it took a terrible fall and is now really coming out of it. But we expected that to happen in Israel, and it didn't. And our economy has stayed strong. And I do credit the Likud-led government in the past decade for getting us through that and actually making our economy grow.
All right. Well, Ruth Lieberman, thank you so much for your time and educating us. And this is a series we're starting to help prepare people and educate people as the Israeli elections come upon us. So we look forward to our next talk and to find out what we're going to talk about. So thanks so much for joining us.
Looking forward. Have a great day.